And record.
Hey, Eric, you're in our movie. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was glad he cast me. I had a lot of fun on set. So I'm here with Rusty Cundieff, the writer and director of 57 Seconds. So it's based on the story Lucifer by E.C. Tubb, and also a co-writing screen credit with Macon Blair. How did this movie come about?
As most films, a circuitous route. We had one of our producers had read E.C. Tubb's story, I think when he was in high school or something, and always wanted to do something with the short. And then Macon, he and one of the other producers got Macon Blair, who wrote a first draft based on that story, which I got to tell you, I liked quite a bit. I would say it was more in line with what the short story was. The short story's protagonist, and I think Lucifer is an apt title for it, is really not someone that you root for ever. I mean, you root for him to take a fall, which he eventually does in the story. But, you know, he's not a great guy. So Macon's story kind of followed that. And I think they tried to get that placed somewhere. But I believe it was just a little bit too dark. It's brilliantly written. I would have liked to have seen that film. It's if you liked Leaving Las Vegas with Nick Cage, it's that kind of thing where you just keep tumbling down this rabbit hole and you see someone that, you know, is just never going to be redeemed. But once I came on board, the idea was, you know, is there a way that we can create a protagonist within this framework that people can root for, because it kind of obvious that, you know, that initial story was just a little too dark to find financing for, to be quite honest. So what I was trying to do was find a way to create a character that would still find the ring, still have from a story standpoint, ability to go to these dark places, but at the same time, be someone that we want to see succeed in some way. So I, you know, it was the idea of giving him something to fight against, a villain or something to fight for. And then as we were kind of playing around with that, it became about, how do we deal with power, and how do we deal with technology? And how is it can be very good over here, but when does it become something that maybe isn't so good for us, because, you know, all these different attributes come with these new discoveries that we have. So it became kind of interesting in that way, and it allowed the character of Franklin to be hopefully someone that you kind of he has a goal, you want to see him succeed, but it gives him, you know, internally these kind of demons that he's fighting against.
I would certainly like to see the darker version of this, but the version that I did see was quite fun. You guys seem to have a lot of fun kind of playing with the rules of going back in 57 seconds. And I'm not familiar with the story. What was the rules? Did that change at all going from the book to the movie? And what were the rule changes?
Yeah, you know what? We pretty much stuck to what the rules were in the short story, which, you know, basically in the short story, the guy that finds the ring, he does some of the things that we have in the movie. Obviously, he gambles with it, easy way to make money, but he's a bit of a jerk from a misogynist standpoint. Like, he'll use the ring to kind of assault a woman, but then he could go back 57 seconds and she doesn't remember it. You know, that we kind of played around with that in terms of how Franklin, you know, gets this girl that he has in the film, but it's not. We didn't want to make it as dark as it was in the short. And then the rules of the ring were actually pretty similar, because in the story, when he taps the ring, he goes back 57 seconds, but he can't keep tapping it until he can get all the way back, you know, to last week, let's say. And that plays an important part at the end of the story, because one of the things that we totally lifted from the short story was the idea of being on a plane, it going down, and you having something that can take you back in time, but you can never get back far enough to save yourself.
Definitely something fun to play with. The time travel, like I think a lot of time travel movies kind of, maybe the rules aren't thought through well enough. So the plot holes begin to open up, but just going back to 57 seconds and having that limited kind of capacity probably helps, I think, keep you out of trouble.
Yeah. And some of that, I was telling somebody else, some of that, had to do with, well, the rules were already there, but one of our actors, Morgan Freeman, he's a big science buff. And
Yes.
he actually wanted some kind of science that he felt you could honestly make the leap to, oh, there could be time travel. And so we had to kind of figure that out before he would sign on to the project.
Oh, that leads me into the next question. On Wikipedia, it says Morgan Freeman has been reported to have been writing parts of the script. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Because I've seen interviews with Morgan Freeman, and he seems like, as an actor, doesn't seem like method. He seems like I'm gonna learn the parts, hit my marks, and that's it. But to hear that he's more involved in this seems kind of out of place, at least as far as I'm aware of him.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say he wrote anything. It was more him asking questions and us figuring out how to get into the script. So, he read one of the first drafts that I finished. And he was like, yeah, I like it, but what's the real science? And I'm like, I don't know what the real science is. It's time travel.
Magic.
It's like, there's no real science. You can't go back in time. What are you talking about? But he was really insistent on it. And so, we talked to some physicists, we talked to some people, and, we found a small kernel of truth that we could then build off of, these crystals that we could build off of. I can't tell you that I understand it, but one of the more interesting things was, as I was kind of researching this, I found, and I had created a whole backstory for Morgan's character, which was, his father died when he was younger. He had been searching for a way to go back to meet his family. And it turns out there was a black physicist who in reality lost his father and is one of the few physicists that kind of deals with the idea of time travel. Because, most people are like, well, it's not going to happen. And it probably never will happen the way it happens in fiction novels and in fiction stories. But there is a small kernel there, thanks to Mr. Freeman.
Also, you've done quite a bunch of stuff. The Fear of a Black Hat, Tales from the Hood, movie 43. I think that movie's hilarious.
It's funny.
Exactly. But you've also directed the lion's share of Chappelle Show, which is, I still think holds up pretty well. What goes into directing something like the Chappelle Show, which is essentially an anthology, more or less, similar to movie 43, as compared to something like 57 Seconds or Fear of a Black Hat or something like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the fun thing about doing Chappelle or an anthology type show like that, or, series of sketches, is that you're always tasked with coming up with a new way of looking at the story, how it's being presented. Stylistically, each episode, each sketch can be different, because in that in particular, of course, we were just aping what's out in the zeitgeist, what's out in, what's in popular culture. So everything had a different look to it. It had a different feel. Fear of a Black Hat, somewhat similar, though, it was a more cohesive story, but that as well, you're, really playing around a lot with, what was popular at the time, these different groups and bands. You're shooting and you're directing for the comedic beats. When you come to something like, 57 Seconds or yeah, definitely more 57 Seconds even than Tales from the Hood, because that was different stories as well. This whole thing is cohesive. The thematic approach to it, the way you shoot, you're creating how you're seeing the world in a more cohesive, direct and linear fashion. But at the same time, having directed a lot of comedy, what comedy really teaches you is where moments are. And that works in drama as well as comedy. I always think that I think that most really good comedy directors can direct almost anything. I don't know that most good dramatic directors necessarily can direct comedy.
And also, I guess, like doing a bunch of anthology kind of things, because you have to hit the style of what that particular story is. So I imagine that's got to help your filmmaking go forward. Like, yeah, I can do sci-fi, I can do horror, I can do all that because I've done it before. Granted, in a comedic context, but you still did it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the sketches that it's not like one that people talk about a lot, but to your point, on Chappelle's show when we did our send up of The Matrix, and Dave is, you know, in the gopher hole of offices, kind of like Keanu is at that beginning thing. It's like, so I really had to study kind of shot by shot what the Wachowskis did in that scene. And you learn, it's like, okay, this is how they kind of created tension here. This is how they move the camera to give you this feeling or that. And then on the other side, then, you know, you're aping things like, oh, God, we did so many things. Well, there was the Time Haters thing. There was the Mad Real World, which was kind of aping the real world on MTV. Oh, of course, Clayton Bigsby, which was aping Frontline, which is, you know, a serious documentary thing. So you're playing around with all these different ways of seeing story. And it does, you pick up some things along the way because you have to study each of these things to get it right, so it feels like it is what it's supposed to be.
Well, I'll end on this. We got a what's in the box segment. In the box, we have people put in movies that they think are kind of underseen, or it's like more people should talk about that because it's so good, and just no one has seen this. What's the movie you would like to put in the box?
Oh, there's one that I always recommend to people, and it is the original, not the remake, of The Taking of Pelham 123 with Walter Matthau. It's a movie you could not make today, not because of the way technology and time has shifted or even the way society has changed. But if you think about that movie, every character in that film at some point has a great line. And I mean a really good line. And you know, today you just can't do that. You know, you're servicing your stars in a different way, and they're like, well, why is this guy that's showing up for one day have such a good line opposite? I'm supposed to have the good line. What are you doing? You just can't make a film like that today. It's brilliant. And on top of that, it's like one of the first films that once Dirty Harry came along and Clint Eastwood, you know, did the Make My Day thing. Or I guess you're asking how many bullets I have, and you know, all that stuff that we remember. But then it created this bit of hero guy thing in the movie where people were quipping all the time, which drove me crazy, because if you're quipping while someone has a gun to your head or your balls, then you're not worried. And guess what? Neither am I as a viewer. But Taking of Pelham 123 has drama and humor in it, and it's never a quip. It's also real. You never feel like any of the characters are saying something that you wouldn't say if you were there. It's just a very honest way of telling a story. And I wish I could see something made like that today, but I just go back to that. Anytime it's on, if I start watching it, I cannot stop.
Yeah, I agree. That movie's amazing. 57 seconds currently streaming and on demand. But this was an incredibly fun film. I love how you guys dug into the premise, and yeah, I hope it does well, and hope everyone enjoys it.
Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Rusty. You have a great day.
You too, man.